Hello and welcome to our video on Pythagoras theorem. Pythagoras theorem says that the sum of the squares of the two shorter sides of a right-angled triangle equals the square of the hypotenuse. Now there's a few words in there. First one I want to point out is for Pythagoras theorem to work, it must be a right-angled triangle. And you can tell if a triangle is right-angled by looking at this little box in the corner there. We need to work out what's this hypotenuse. If you recall, hypotenuse is the longest side. And hypotenuse, when we're using Pythagoras theorem, hypotenuse is always labelled as C. So we've got this C here as well. It's really important that you always remember that the hypotenuse, the longest side, is C. Otherwise the theorem doesn't work. I've also put a bit of information here that if you're asked to write an answer using exact values, so not using your calculator and not getting a decimal approximation, then you can just leave your answer with a square root sign. For example, square root of 3 or square root of any number. Okay, I've got some steps down here and an example we're going to use to go through the first set of steps. When you're solving problems involving Pythagoras, you need to first of all identify that it is a right-angle triangle and that the problem is asking you to use the Pythagoras theorem. The very first step is to write the formula that you'll be using, and you might think that's a bit silly because all of them are going to be the Pythagoras theorem for this type of question. But we'll be doing some different measurement problems soon, and you'll have different formulas for those. So it's important to first of all identify that it is Pythagoras and then write down the rule that you're going to use. So we can tell this is we can use the Pythagoras theorem for this problem because it is a right-angled triangle and we're trying to find the longest side, the hypotenuse. So we can write out the formula we're going to use. A squared plus b squared equals c squared. Step number 2 is to ensure all the measurements are in the same units. We've got meters here, we've got meters here, so we're good to go. Step 3, draw a diagram. It's already drawn for us. And label the sides. Really important to do this so you don't get confused later on. What I mentioned above, the longest side is the first one we label. That is always the C. And once you've labelled the C, you can make the other two, A and B. Doesn't matter which order you choose to write them in. Step 4, substitute your measurements into our formula here. So instead of A, I'm going to write 10. Don't forget the squared. Instead of B, I'm going to write 5. And C will just leave as C. Step 5, calculate the equation. I'm going to write this one out by hand. Step 6, square root as your final step. So when we get here, lots of people stop and say, yep, C equals 125. But it's C squared if you look carefully. So we need to do the opposite to get rid of this little squared, so we've just got C by itself. Opposite of squared is square root. So we can say C equals the square root of 125. And this is what I was saying earlier up here. If you're asked to write an answer using exact values, then you just leave your answer like this. C equals square root of 125. That's your final answer. If you are asked, and most of the time to do with measurement, we're going to be asked to simplify it. So we need to put it into the calculator. And when we do that, we get C equals 11.18. Final step 7 down here, add correct units. Biggest number of marks are lost here with people forgetting to do this at the end. Lots of people leave it like this, forget to add the units. They're easy marks, don't lose them. We've got meters, so this is going to be in meters as well. And there's your final answer.